I'd like to call this meeting to order. At this time, I would like to have an attendance roll call.
Present.
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 I'd like to call the Halifax County School Board to order, the call to order. Do we do a roll call, ma'am? Okay. Present.
Present. Present.
At this time, I would like to entertain a motion to approve the agenda, or in the approval of the agenda, I would like to include Davenport Financial Advisors in the approval of the agenda. Do I have such a motion to approve the agenda with that inclusion, please?
Mr. Chairman, I got a amendment if I could.
You may.
I would like to remove item E from agenda until the full board has a chance to digest everything they hear tonight. All the information, finances and everything, because they haven't been privy to everything that the joint committee has, so.
I'll second his amendment.
There's been a motion, and it has been properly seconded, that we remove item E from the agenda. Is there any further, all in favor of that?
I got some discussion.
Go right ahead, further discussion.
So in that discussion, I understand that the full board has not been privy to all the details of the finance here, and I understand that. I did come here tonight prepared to make some motions and put this to bed, but obviously, some people feel we shouldn't. So I'm gonna just ask, in our plan, I would hope that our finance committee would meet between now and our December 6th meeting, and we're prepared December 6th to make a vote on it then. Is everyone in agreement? Is that kind of in agreement that's what I want to do? Because the school system needs to know, school board needs to know our plans, well before January 1st. So is that okay?
That step would agree with the board's policy and procedures that we have in place. So
Okay.
I'm in agreement with that.
I think that in such an important decision, that it should not just be the Finance Committee, the Joint Facilities Committee was appointed for that purpose. And so I feel that the Joint Facilities Committee should take precedent over that to make recommendations from the full board.
All right, you have an amendment on the floor, and you also have two discussions going on. One of them is to exclude item E, and there also is a discussion on the floor talking about the joint facility should have precedence over the finance committee's meeting.
I think it's a good idea if both committees met.
I think a better idea would be to have a
Input with
special
both
call.
of 'em.
Yeah. Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
I don't see up under E, are you saying that this pertains to the compensation as well? Because I think that needs to be discussed tonight, rather than putting that off for our teachers.
That's in section D.
That's not in
under
the,
That's what
item
I'm
D.
just asking.
That's not in
I'm just asking.
it's not in the,
Okay. Yeah, I know.
that was not in the, it's gonna be discussed anyway, teachers.
All right, so listening to your further discussion here, would you like to withdraw your motion and then make another motion requesting a special call meeting be made regarding item E? Would you like to do that? Because you have a motion on the floor. Would you like to withdraw that motion?
No, I wouldn't.
Yes, sir.
There's only one motion, and that is the amendment to the agenda. The rest is just
Discussion.
Okay, all right,
to
okay.
the motion.
All right, okay.
You didn't make a motion then?
No.
Okay.
I seconded his motion.
Oh, you're saying, okay.
So, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to call for the question, please.
All right.
I just said I would like to move item E from the agenda until the full board has time to review all the information they received tonight. The financial and everything else that's entailed.
Well, that's the motion. Is there a second to that?
I
It has been
second it.
probably motion is second. Is there any further discussion to this matter? All in favor? Any opposed? The motion carries. Item E will be removed. Oh, you're welcome. All right, this particular time, Mrs. Frawley, do you want to approve your agenda?
I'd like to have a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved, Madam Chair.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. And all opposed? Motion is carried.
Mr. Chairman,
All right. Okay. Now, we need a motion to approve our agenda. Is there such a motion?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Second.
It's been probably, motion and second. Is there any further discussion to this matter? All in favor? Any opposes? The motion carried. The agenda is approved. All right, with that said and done, I believe we have a presentation at this particular time from Davenport Financial Advisors.
Good evening. My name is Ted Cole. I'm with Davenport and Company. My colleague Ben Wilson is with me. We're both going to talk with you all this evening. I'm going to start us off with sort of a high-level overview. Everybody, both boards should have a copy of this presentation. There are page numbers in the lower right corner, and we're going to reference a few of those as we go. We are not planning to go through the entire book. There are some things in the appendix that we would be happy to flip to if there are questions about the cases and scenarios that we ran. But we're really planning to go through roughly the first 5 pages of the presentation. Just a little bit of background. We've served as financial advisor to the county for a number of years, and by and large, what that means is helping and assisting with the planning for capital projects, helping to develop a plan of finance for capital projects, and executing that plan of finance, whether it's a school project or a non-school project. So that's sort of the perspective that we bring. And we've been working with staff, county staff in particular, and the facilities committee on and off over the last several months to prepare this discussion material. We both would be more than happy to answer questions as we go. So if there are questions on something we're talking through, please, whatever your normal protocols would be, raise your hand or, speak out. We're happy to address questions as we go. So with that, I'll go to page 1. Again, the page number's in the lower right corner. We're just going to give a high-level overview of the existing debt that's in place today for the county, and we're going to break that into debt that's been issued for school purposes and non-school purposes. So it's what we would call the existing tax-supported debt profile of Halifax County. We're going to talk through the development of a school capital funding plan, and we've looked at a number of different analyses, and we're going to talk about the affordability of some different scenarios. And you'll see that we have a summary page, but ultimately we have a base case and 3 alternative cases that Ben is going to walk through. In the back are all the details, the appendix for each case that we've run. There's about 4 pages of detail for each case, and as well as the existing debt details, the debt that's outstanding today, and a little bit of support information on some of the growth assumptions we've made relative to the new sales tax that was instituted a year or so ago. If you go to page 2, on the left-hand side graphically, you can see this is what we would call the existing tax-supported debt profile of the county. We think of everything on a fiscal year basis, so July 1 through June 30. We're currently in fiscal year 22, and that's where all of our analyses start in fiscal year 22. But we go back to the last audit. So as of the close of fiscal year 21, the county had about a little over $47 million of debt outstanding. That debt had been issued over the years for different projects. We have refunded some of that debt for debt service savings, but the aggregate of all the principal that's left to be repaid over time is about $47 million. 24 of that was for county purposes, or what I'll call non-school purposes, county courts, facilities, things of that nature. And about 22.9, I'm going to round up to 23 million, is debt that had been issued over the years for school purposes. So almost a 50-50 split of the total amount, 47 million, what's been issued for the schools versus the county. And you can see in the graph, those of you that have the book, the dark green is the annual debt service for the county-related debt, and the lighter green is for the school-related debt. And so what you'll notice pretty quickly, I think, is that the school-related debt is paid off entirely by 2027, the last year of payment for any of the debt obligations that were issued for schools is in fiscal year 27, whereas the county debt goes out to fiscal year 40. And you can see that on the right-hand side. By year, we know to the penny all of your debt is fixed rate. It is not going, your debt payments will not change unless the county moves forward with a refunding or some other action to change it. So we know with certainty what your annual payments are for both the county-related debt obligations, the school-related debt obligations, and in its entirety. And just order of magnitude for the folks in the audience, in the current fiscal year, the total payments on all the debt outstanding is a little over $7 million. It steps down year over year. Some years it steps down more than others. And for the county debt service, that's about $2.3 million. For the schools, it's about $4.7 million. So we're right at about $7 million in total. That's the starting point for what we're now going to talk about, is some scenarios on how much potential new debt we could afford to take on for the school projects that are being discussed. And the page I want to talk through, and then I'm going to turn it over to Ben, is page 3. There's a lot of numbers on here, but it will make a lot of sense if you just bear with me as I go through it. And I would suggest we need to work from left to right, and you'll notice that across that green bar there are letters for each column of numbers. And this is what we call our affordability analysis. What you're going to see when we run these cases is we have backed into the amount of debt that could be issued and supported by the revenues that are currently being budgeted for debt plus the new sales tax. And we've looked at the debt a few different ways. We have handled some of the revenues a few different ways, but we are, in all of our cases, we are not assuming any other sources of revenues are required. No tax increases are required for this debt. Again, nothing beyond what you're already budgeting for debt service plus the new sales tax. So as you look at the far left, column A, that's the fiscal year. Again, everything's on a fiscal year basis. Column B, as in boy, is the existing school debt service. That's for the debt that's already on the books. It goes out to 2027. We know what those payments are every year. Column C is blank. That is where we're going to drop in the debt service for what would be the new school debt issuance. Okay, so it's blank right now. When Ben gets up, that's what we're going to start measuring, is under our different cases, how much annual payment can we include in column C to make this work. So for now, column D is just the same as column B. That is your existing school debt service. The middle of the page is where there's more going on, columns E, F, G, H, and I. And essentially what we're doing here is we're mirroring, by and large, the budgeting approach that the county has adopted for repaying debt service. And column E is what we call the current general fund appropriation for school debt service. It's about $4.6 million in fiscal year 22. That is from current year revenues, and that is being appropriated for school debt service. And you can see in column E, we've held that flat. We've not moved that. We've not increased it. We've not decreased it. We're holding that flat at $4.6 million. Column F is a column where we are accounting for an event that may occur out in fiscal year 2028 as it relates to revenues that the county is receiving related to Dominion Power Plant, tax revenue and other things that are associated with that plant. And Scott can correct me if I misspeak here, but the idea being that that plant may come offline, the tax revenues stop or are curtailed. And so what we're doing here, you'll see column F is bracketed. We are acknowledging in doing that there will be a loss of tax revenue to the county that could occur with that event, with that plant shutting down. Our starting point for that is a loss of about $2.5 million of tax revenue that you're collecting today that will have to be replaced somehow. So it's an event in the future that is likely to occur or may occur, and the planning work that we've been doing with staff is to acknowledge that and build that into the program. When we run through our cases, we're gonna look at a few different numbers for column F as in Frank. That will be one of the variables. Column G is the projection for the new additional retail sales tax revenue that was voted and implemented. We're starting that in fiscal 22. You all did collect some already prior to fiscal 22, $2 million and change. We're starting it at $3.6 million as a full year collection, $3.6 million in the current fiscal year, fiscal 22, and we're growing it at about 1.8%. How did we get to the 1.8%? If you care to, you can look in the appendix. It's essentially a 10-year growth rate, a CPI growth rate that is calculated and maintained by the Census Bureau for what they call the South region. When we went and pulled that data down, it was seemed to be a reasonable proxy for this part of Virginia, for this part of the country. It was a 10-year analysis, and it was 1.8%. So certainly not saying that it will grow every year by 1.8%, but I think it is a reasonable approach for the planning purposes that we would hope that this revenue would grow. We would expect it would grow, but not necessarily every year. But absent a crystal ball, we said, let's use that 1.8% as a growth rate for this additional sales tax. And then finally, in column H, those are revenues associated with a refunding that the county did a year or so ago for some existing school debt. So there's $9, $10, as much as $75,000 a year that was recognized through a refunding, but it ends in 2026. So there are a few different revenue sources flowing through this program. As I said, we're going to look at some scenarios where we make adjustments to column F, which is the loss of revenue from the power plant coming offline. We're gonna use our sales tax growth in a consistent manner every year going forward. And then I'm gonna turn it over to Ben here in a moment to walk you through sort of our approach and the summary of the cases that we run. What we're getting to for you all is how much debt could you issue, and we've assumed that you would issue the debt this coming spring through one of the state bond programs called the Virginia Public School Authority, which is used quite often. They issue debt twice a year in Virginia for local governments for school purposes. So what we're backing into is the amount of debt you could issue in each scenario, supported by the revenues that we've identified. We're looking at 30-year debt. That's as long a term as the VPSA program will go. If we were looking at 20-year debt, there would be less capacity. So 30-year debt has maybe higher interest rates, but it's got lower annual payments, which is helping to maximize the amount of debt we can issue for whatever project is ultimately approved. So it's all being done through the Virginia Public School Authority under the assumption that we would issue that debt this coming spring. And just as an aside, if that were something that we wanted to do, that process would need to get kicked off in January to be in a position to participate in that spring pool, and we can talk through that if there are questions. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ben to pick up on page 4 unless there's any questions on what I've said so far.
Good evening, everyone. So picking up on page 4, like Ted mentioned, this summary of the scenarios sort of goes back through much of what Ted has already covered. The first section there at the top just sort of goes into the assumptions we're making. We are going to assume $3.6 million of revenue from this new sales tax in fiscal year 2022. And as Ted said, we'll be growing that at 1.81% based on that CPI number. So we are also assuming a spring 2022 borrowing through VPSA, the Virginia Public School Authority. And if you were to issue bonds through VPSA this spring, your first interest payment would occur on January 15th of 2023. So 1 year from this January, that's in fiscal year 2023. And we have assumed that principal payments for 3 of these 4 scenarios don't begin until July 15th of 2025. So that gives you a couple years on the front end with a lower payment where you're only making interest payments to allow you to collect some of these revenues and build up a bit of a reserve to help you make the payments going forward. So the 4 cases that we ran here, we ran a base case, which in this case we assumed that only the sales tax revenues are available for this new project. So that $3.6 million that's growing for the next 30 years is the only revenue available for a new project. In case 1, 2, and 3, we assumed that some portion of column E on page 3, the current budget for debt service, some portion of that will still be available to pay debt service on the new project. So the difference between 1, 2, and 3 is how much revenue is lost starting in fiscal year 2028. And we made an assumption of 2.5, 2.75, and 3, just to be able to get a better perspective on how much capacity is lost for every increment of $250,000 that revenues are not kept within the program. So if we move on to page 5, this again has a lot of numbers on it, but this is sort of a general overview of where we got to with these 4 cases. If you can see in the second column there, you've got our base case. In the first section there at the top, in lines 1 through 3, that's just expressing how much of the current budget is being kept within the program here. And you can see the existing budget is a little shy of $4.7 million. In the base case, we are not keeping any of that within here, and we are only using the sales tax revenues. In case 1, we are removing $2.5 million, potentially from the Dominion plant, and you end up with about $2.2 million. In case 2, it's 2.75 that's pulled out, leaving you with 1.9. And case 3, you take out $3 million, and you're left with about 1.7. Now, those 3 numbers, 2.2, 1.9, and 1.7, are annual numbers starting in 2028 that are over and above the sales tax that we are talking about here. So base case is just the 3.6 million, and then cases 1 through 3 have the 3.6 million being grown, plus these numbers in yellow here. So moving on to line 6, which I think is the main focus here, is the amount of debt that you could issue based on these revenue assumptions that we have made. So in the base case, where you are only using the sales tax, we've calculated a capacity of about $91.9 million. In cases 1, 2, and 3, you have a higher number because we have those extra revenues available from the current budget. And for case 1, we're at about 128 million. Case 2, about 124. And case 3, about 120. So for every $250,000 that are removed from the program, you lose about $4 million in capacity. So these numbers here in green have a planning rate assumption of 3%. And that is a bit higher than where the current market is. If you look at the blue line at the very bottom, we also ran this analysis assuming you all got the interest rates that are in the market as of November 4th, so a couple weeks ago. And in that market, you would get about a 2.1% interest rate. So the capacity, because our interest rate is lower, our annual payments would be lower, so we would be able to issue additional debt. So your capacity is higher in this blue row because it's a lower interest rate. Again, we are not planning on moving forward with this issuance until the spring, so any number of things could happen where you could end up at that 3% level. So for conservatism, that is why we went with the 3% in the green row. But you can see in the blue, you're at about 102 million for the base case compared to the 91.9 with the planning rate. In case one, it's about 142 million versus 128 at the planning rate. The case two, we're at about 137.8 compared to 124. And case three, 133 million compared to 120. So somewhere within that range would be the planning rate versus the current market. If interest rates move up from the current market from where they are right now, between now and the spring, you could end up somewhere in that range or above the 3% if the markets move enough. So that is something that we do not know at this time, which is why we built in a bit of that cushion there. So with that, I would just like to see if anyone has any questions. There are additional details in the back in these appendices that show the cash flows that Ted walked through. If you would like to go through those, or if you have any specific questions, we'd be happy to talk through them. But
Any questions from the Board of Supervisors?
I do have one, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Just know we looked at this situation involving borrowing, and just for to simplify for the public, that penny sales tax was just for the new construction or renovation of the schools. Is that correct?
I believe so, yes.
And is it your belief that that penny sales tax would be sufficient to compensate the school board in whatever they do, whichever endeavor?
So we ran these assuming that entire 1% would be able to cover either all or a portion of the project. The base case here is just the 1% that you're mentioning, the penny. The base case is if they only use the penny. So you're looking at 91.9 to 102 million.
Okay, and there will be no necessity to raise any other revenue based on the penny revenue?
Based on what we've run here, there would be no additional tax raises, but we have assumed that revenues that currently are being used to pay school debt service will be used in case 1, 2, and 3. Okay. So it's revenues that you all already have, and you would not necessarily have to raise new revenues. You would just have to commit current revenues to this.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I just want to emphasize, I mean, we are using the full 1% of the sales tax, but we are making assumptions about what the sales tax will be in the future. We're assuming some growth. We obviously can't tell you that's what's going to happen, but for planning purposes, that's kind of where we've landed, and I think it's important to know that these are based on projections. In any given year, these sales tax revenues, which are economically sensitive, obviously, could underperform or outperform what's been included.
And you were conservative in your estimates, is that correct?
Pardon?
You were conservative in making these estimates?
Yes, I believe so. I mean, we've consulted with staff about what they believe is going to be collected in the current fiscal year, given what little bit of history you have, and we have used a growth rate that we believe is a reasonable growth rate, but as I said, in any given year, the growth is likely to be a little different than what we've assumed. But we believe we've been realistic and I guess conservative to some extent in the assumptions we've made.
Any more questions from the Board of Supervisors? We're gonna yield that time over to the school board.
Are there any questions from this side? Yes, ma'am.
Yours on? All right, thank you. I just want to make sure I understand this correctly. So we're saying right now, if we use only the sales tax that's been approved for the capital fund, and then the budget for the construction is between 92 million and 102 million. If we use the additional capital debt service that is running out in 2028, then that gives us the additional funding that gets you to the 133 to the 141?
Could you, do you mind repeating the question?
Sure. So the estimate for the 92 million, the base case, 92 million to the 102, is based on only using the sales tax to fund the school building.
That's correct. And just let me say that provides for a range of capacity between the 92 and the 102 million. What the actual budget for the project will be is don't know, but that's the capacity.
Okay. And then the case 1, 2, and 3 is assuming that we're using not only the sales tax, but we're using the existing cap fund from page 3, where that debt service is being paid off in 2028. Is that the difference?
Yeah, it's really, we're using, from page 3, we're using varying amounts of column E. So in
Okay, yep.
does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
And case 1, we're using more of it than case 2 and case 3, which is why those amounts, the debt capacity amounts, are going down.
Gotcha, thank you. So the impact for us would be using that, and the difference between the 100 million and potentially the highest of 142 is that capital fund wouldn't be available for anything else.
Correct. And you make a good point, or a point I meant to speak about earlier was this is the only project being run through the model. No other capital projects on the county side are contemplated here. This is just capacity for the school program.
Are there any other questions? Mr. Pennell?
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate your time tonight. All right, at this time, we should be at alphabet C, briefing from the Joint Facilities Committee. Now, let me say this. We have been over this several times back and forth, so we don't want to be here all night discussing this thing. So whatever you have to say, let's make it as brief as we possibly can. So we have a briefing, so let's get to it.
The only thing I can tell you was the joint boards did not come to a consensus on what they wanted to do. So I thought maybe we would hash it out, some of it here tonight. I don't.
Okay, all right.
I know where some people stand and I know where others stand, but I don't know where we stand collectively, so.
I do know that we have been meeting for several months now, with the superintendent and the county administrator and I and the chairman of the school board. We've been having these 2-by-2 meetings, and then the joint facility has been meeting most of the time a lot. So I'm quite sure that we have some conclusion to some of those meetings that we've been holding. Okay.
May I speak?
You may.
To speak a little bit further on the Joint Facility Committee, when we met, was it last Wednesday? When we met last Wednesday, we talked about all of the scenarios that we would have in terms of borrowing. And I thank Davenport for their discussion and for their analysis. Where it puts us now, and as Mr. Throckmorton has said, we haven't made a decision yet, but it puts us in a place where we will be in a position to possibly get things accomplished without raising taxes. That was the main concern of a lot of people in the community. And what I got from the committee meeting the other night is that if we operate within reasonable grounds, we'll be able to accomplish a lot of things without the community having to worry about tax increases. And what we're going to do, hopefully, is that we're going to operate, number one, in the best interest of the citizens, number two, in the best interest of the county. And we're going to try to get something done that's going to be beneficial to the county for years to come. We have not made a decision, as I said, but what we need to do now to evaluate. I thank Mr. Ricketts for asking to extend this to another night to decide, because the full board hasn't discussed the results of these reports. And I think it's necessary that we do our due diligence in terms of discussion so we can reach a conclusion. Because the only thing that the Board of Supervisors is to do is they are supposed to fund. After that, it's going to be up to the school board to do what they do with the available funding. Hopefully, we're going to reach a conclusion that's going to be, as I said, in the best interest of the county. And I think it can be done. And all I ask is your patience. We're going to move in all deliberate speed, because this is something that we need to do in terms of saving the county money, not just now, but for the future.
I feel like that, you know, when we were in discussions with the committee, and the three of us was with the committee, on the three committee members with the school board, there was a lot of information given out to all of us, almost mind-boggling sometimes. I think I got 4 or 5 different sets of plans here or whatever. But I think it boils down to, again, like Mr. Clayman said, how much money is needed was what I was thinking from the school committee, but I guess we're going to reverse and say we got this much money for the school to borrow. And so this is the price that the school would have to be kept at, along with, it was 3 things that was packaged together, was my understanding, was the school, it was the teachers' pay, compensation, new compensation, and of remodeling, keeping or closing elementary schools. And see, all those questions still haven't been answered to know if enough funds is going to be there for all 3 things. And that's where my kind of undecision is right now, because the 1 cent is for the remodeling of elementary schools if needed. And I think we come up with, you know, a split maybe of, I believe it was 30, 70, no, 28 or something like that. Maybe 20% of the tax money going to remodeling the elementary schools if needed, and the other 80% for the new schools, high school. So, you know, still sort of unanswered there, some questions that needs to be ironed out, I think, before us to make a decision. You know, we might have another sales tax increase for the new school, but is there one coming next year or year after for the teachers' pay and that type of thing? We need to know that in the long run. This is a big project, and we are already 15 years, if we go with it, over borrowing capacity of 15 years, going from 15 to 30 years for the county. And, you know, we got to think 25 more years, no big projects to borrow money for. We got to think about that also in the revenues. But anyway, and again, the whole board needs to know all this information, I think, on our end before a decision can be made.
Can I make just a minor correction? The teacher compensation wouldn't come under this spending anyway, because the compensation that we're dealing with is a capital expenditure. So the teacher's compensation will be out of the general fund. So, teacher compensation has nothing to do with the building of the new school, because we cannot use the penny, money from the penny revenue for teacher compensation. That penny revenue is just for capital improvement.
I guess my thoughts on that is the earth side, beside the penny, there was some other extra revenue that we're going into to compensate for all three projects at one time.
But we wouldn't have to use any of the general based on just this analysis. Like you said, it's just speculation on the part of Davenport, but they did a good study. Just based on what they're saying, that we may not have to use that, but even if we had to do it, get more money, it would have to be under capital improvement. It wouldn't have to be for, it wouldn't touch the teachers' compensation.
Any comments from this side? Mr. McDowell?
Yes. This is for the Board of Supervisors. My question is, we're gonna lose $2.5 million in 2028. How are we gonna make that money up unless we raise taxes? I know it's hard to see the future, but that's a lot of revenue that we're gonna lose from the power plant.
Mr. McDowell, the study did by Davenport included that loss, and it showed how it would be compensated. They showed in the plan how we could continue to exist because the debt revenue will be removed in 2027, so that would compensate for that, but they included the speculation up to $3 million at one point of that lost revenue. It was all part of the study that we just had tonight, that Jeff was presented. It was presented to joint facilities last week, and this is a study now. But that 2.5 million was included in the estimate that we're going to lose.
I was going to say on page 3 of the Davenport study, see in 2028, $2.5 million
Yeah.
in reserve savings.
Yeah.
So the power plant closed, we're saving, we got $4.7 million in debt service.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to save $2.5 million to save the power plant closed. I hope it doesn't, but it's true. You know, you hear about no coal, no whatever, it's going to trouble, like we're doing in the news. But then on page 5, as Ms. Shotwell said earlier, page 1, page 2, that's if we borrow the full 2.2 and 4.7, that leaves 2.5.
Mhm.
We borrow the 1.9, that leaves us at 2.8. So we got a $300,000 buffer, we still have
Yeah.
over the 2.5. And then down to the 1.7, we're saving $3 million, like Mr. Claiborne just said. So the 2.5 is protected there, and that's the whole way through this process.
Okay, so what you're saying, we don't have to worry about taxes being raised come 2028.
Where we got at 2.5 million, power plant closing, we're okay. We do not, so power, Kenny real estate tax is $275,000. So no, when it closes, we're not gonna have to raise real estate tax 7 cents to compensate. We're not gonna have to, it's already covered.
I hope you're right.
Go ahead, Scott. Mr. Chairman, if I could weigh in on that. The staff for a very long time has been under the impression that the power plant is potentially in the 2025 to 2030 range. And so the county has always set aside out of the $4.7 million of school debt that falls off comes off of the debt service schedule. The county has always reserved $2.5 million of that debt coming off to compensate for losing the power plant. So that's been in our matrices for almost a decade probably. So you have revenue coming from the power plant that's no longer going to be there, you have debt service of the school system that is no longer going to be there at the same time. And so those wash each other out. That's why there is only $2.2 million of that existing debt service available for working into this program. So that has been a scenario for years and probably up to a decade.
I think the gentleman brings up a very good point in asking about the increase in taxes. I'd first like to say, I want to say it publicly, that I think the people in this community have been very generous, very responsible to us, the Board of Supervisors, as well as the school board. I'm remembering correctly, last year I think we had a tax increase, and then we turned around and we asked for a 1% sales tax increase. And the people put the loads on their back. So where I'm going with this, it's a pretty big and significant picture. We understand that our school division has capital needs. One of the main reasons the people said by about a margin of 70% that they were willing to help us with those facility needs, whether it be at the elementary schools or high schools. Keep in mind, we're paying on 3 debt services within our school division now. We understand clearly the needs and the requests that the school board is making. We are concerned, we care about our students. We care about the kids in this county. That's first and foremost. But I think we need to refocus and redirect just a little bit. Modern school facility, I think, is needed here in the 21st century, I would agree. However, we're losing teachers, and we're losing them fast. And a new facility doesn't put teachers under the roof. It only costs more money. So we get it. I wasn't a big proponent of the full package of grouping everything together. And as you can see here tonight, we actually struck one part of the agenda due to the broad scope that has been put before us here tonight. However, I would like to say that I felt the school board being paid elected officials, much as the Board of Supervisors, by the people, they made a choice that was long overdue, whether to renovate or to build new. We needed a decision. So I'm okay with that. But it is the Board of Supervisors' responsibility to figure out how to fund those facility needs, how to plan for this county, be prudent in spending, and be accountable to the public. So it's just a little unfair of the school board to, so to speak, recommend and dictate to us how many cents more we need to be paying to give them what they need for their project. I wouldn't dare, as supervisor of District 6, I wouldn't dare ask the people, after they've been so gracious to us, for more money. We can fund teachers' compensation. We have the ability to do so. But it all comes down to this. It's neither whether we sit here tonight and argue about new facility or renovated facility. It gets back to what Davenport stood before us tonight and said what you can actually afford. And how do you plan smart, just as we all are going back home tonight and figure out how we're going to plan and live through even the rise in expenses. And we all get up and go to work every day, but we have to make plans on how do we move forward. So it gets down to what you can afford. And that's what we intend to look at. That's what I intend to consider, and not overburden the people by living above our means. I think this board, I would expect this board to put forth a number to try and help education in this county through all means necessary and to our best ability. However, it is, just as the question was asked even about the power plant, there is so much more that we have to consider. This board drinks from the fire hose sometimes. And so we have to prepare for that as well. It doesn't mean that we're against education or that we're for something else or against anything else, but we have to look at the full scope. And again, that's what I would expect this board to do, and in a timely fashion, because things continue to escalate. Things are getting more and more expensive, and we all need to make decisions so that we can move forward with this. The people have spoken. They've agreed to the 1% sales tax increase. We're the ones waiting. We need to be able to utilize the resources that you, the people, have so graciously granted, and use them wisely and plan for the future, because we have more issues to come other than just a new high school for the next 30 years. But I think we can put it all together. I think this board will put it all together, and we'll have to be able, all of us, both boards, to live within our means. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brandon. All right, with that said, any more comments on this one?
Just one more.
Go ahead.
Mr. Brandon, you're correct, but I'd like to just say that our sole purpose here as the Board of Supervisors is to just fund. And we're going to be funding based on the studies and our due diligence. And I think our board is capable of doing that. But I'm not going to try to usurp the power of the school board in terms of making that decision. Their decision is going to have to be made in relation to what they feel is best based on the funding that we get. I'm not going to tell you what to do. I can't tell you what to do because that's your purpose. But our main thing is we want to make sure that the county is able to get through this. And our decision is going to be based on the studies and the diligence conducted by the report and our county administrator and our committees. And I feel that in the end, whatever we give the school board, they'll be able to utilize it and do what's best for the school for the future. So I think we can continue to work together. It's a time for us to come together and not try to put pressure on anyone. And I think we're getting close to that point. But again, I like to emphasize that teacher compensation has nothing to do with this tonight. It's separate. Teacher compensation is not a capital expense. You get paid by the county. You don't get paid with that penny. That's all I have to say to you.
Okay. Is there another comment, Mr. Francisco?
I have a whole lot of comments I want to make, but I'm not exactly sure our format here. Are we going to speak a little bit and they speak a little bit, come back, or we just lay it all out here now?
We're going to speak, sir, and then we're going to turn it over to Mrs. Fowler and her board and let her speak, okay? Go right ahead.
Can I do a whole lot of speaking?
Go right ahead.
I got so much to say, I probably won't cover it all, and it'll probably be too long. Mr. Pennell has directed us to be short and brief. Anyway, our election on November 2nd proved across our country from Virginia all the way across to Washington State that police and education are still most important to our citizens in our whole country, not even here in Halifax County, state of Virginia. And I think we've been doing that. I got a graph here now. I stated it in our Clay's Mill facility meeting, the school closing meeting, I'll call it. And our county, 44% of our income is in real estate taxes. We give 45% of our income to the school system. So to answer the question, is the Board of Supervisors working hard, putting our money where our mouth is? Absolutely. We're giving you 1% more than all the land, all the houses, everything, buildings, everything in our county to it. The rest of the county, being the staff, the commissioner of revenue, the dispatchers, police, the whole 9 yards, everyone else is running off of other funds coming into our county. So I just wanted to be clear on that. And Mr. Claiborne, and I think Mr. Brandon spoke as well, it's true that the teacher's compensation is separate from capital that we're talking about tonight with what Davenport brought before us, and we're talking about the penny sales tax and so forth. But I do want to talk about that before we leave here tonight. I want to talk about it in depth. And but to me, that's completely separate. We're talking about a high school renovation versus building a new one. Sports fields, athletic complexes, the whole 9 yard falls under capital. So, can I say what I think?
Yes, sir. You do, sir.
Okay, good. So what I've been hearing, and the motion earlier that I guess most of the board here may not be privy to certain things. The facilities committee, which is Mr. Throckmorton, Mr. Claiborne, and Mr. Short, they've been meeting. So some of the board may not be, but I have been on the phone and worrying the heck out of everybody that will talk to me to find out to run these numbers, being the finance committee chair. So I think about this high school right here. We're sitting in here today. It's a beautiful building. It is outdated. It's 40-plus years old. And it goes against my grain to tear down a building that has been proven to be structurally sound. It just, oh my gosh, it kills me at my heart. Especially when I've heard that it's going to cost $2 to $3 million to tear down a building, I believe that's assessed at $14 or $15 million, as poor as our county is. So that bothers me, but at the same time, we do have this penny sales tax. I'll call it 1% penny, same thing, that the people voted, as Mr. Brandon stated earlier, and people are in agreement. They want something done with our school capital projects. So we've heard figures anywhere from $30 million back 4 years ago up to $75 million for a renovation, I think was the most recent one. We've heard prices of $136 million for the schools. We've heard prices of $122, $118, $112. I would like to point out tonight, a lot of people may not realize, and someone please correct me if I'm wrong, and when we struck out that amendment, we said we're not going to talk about how to secure funding. So if I cross the line, somebody please stop me. But, God, I lost my train of thought when I said that. What was I just saying? Oh, yeah, to renovate this high school, we're beauty to have the 1% sales tax that makes us able to do anything with the schools here tonight. We have the $4.7 million that we brought up so much tonight, and we're going to save $2.5 million for the closing of the power plant. So we have an additional 2.2 we can use to go with this, and that will fund, as Ms. Shotwell stated earlier, we can go anywhere from 119 million up to $142 million. So the courthouse, everybody knows about the courthouse that was just fixed up, renovated, added on, or whatever. We started off with the courthouse was going to be probably a $15, $18 million project. It ended up being $29 million. I'm going to use 30 for round numbers.
Can I correct you on that?
Yes, sir.
It started out at $9.8 million in 2012.
Okay. Thank you. Started off at $9.8 million. It grew to 14. It grew to 18. That back building that the board was trying to be fiscally responsible, saved that back building. When they got in there and sawed the building in half, they found out it was not stable. And then we got into the Commonwealth Attorney's office, and then we got into that big pipe under Edmond Street that no one knew was there, and then we got into the soft road, and we got into everything else. My point is, everybody in our county is still fresh on their mind. We just renovated a 62,000, renovated and added on new, don't get me wrong, a 62,000 square foot building that cost $29 million, okay? 62,000 square feet. This high school, I believe, is 330 330,000 square feet. Is that correct? Roughly? 330,000 square feet. So if I do my math, 5 times 60 equals 62 equals 5.3 times 62 equals 330. So if you use those figures, $150 million for a renovation of the school, I don't believe that's accurate. But my point is, at the same time, I hate to tear down a $15 million building for $2 or $3 million on top of that to remove it. If a new school can be built for $112, $118 million, whatever that number is, I believe that's our best thought. And I'm gonna point out something too, and please correct me if I'm wrong. I've talked with Dr. Lindenberg, talked with Roy Keith a lot. He's my school board representative. Roy Keith, Mr. Lloyd, he's my school board representative in my area. I'm so nervous. I'm nervous up here speaking. I keep saying.
All right, Mr.
Oh.
Francisco.
The price of the actual high school was what I have urged to get out into public for people to see. The price of we've heard anywhere from 30 to 74 million for a renovation. The price of the actual high school building is $85 million. Is that correct? The high school building alone.
The building itself, I think, is 81 to 85. I can't remember the exact, but somewhere in that number, yes.
So this figure everyone's been hearing from 100 to $136 million, that is including a new football stadium, a new track, new baseball fields, scoreboards, the whole 9 yards, the school, new parking lots. I'm not sure about the tennis courts because they're located off over here on the side, but when that is everything. That is all. The new roads are going to have to be put in. New parking lots are going to be put in. New football stadium and everything. And I know sports is very important to a lot of people in our county. But that when I hear that this building is $85 million for a new high school, the 255,000 square foot high school, I understand, to spend 60 or 75 or whatever. I just showed a 62,000 square foot courthouse was 30 million, and this is over 5 times as big. I believe that that a new renovation is the way to go, and I believe it's important to the public to know that in this 118 million figure I've heard last time, that's including a lot of sports, that it's important to a lot of people, that it's everything there too. So.
Right, thank you, Mr. Francisco.
Thank y'all for bearing with me.
All right, thank you, sir. Let me just do this, Ms. Frederick, real quickly. I think we can get there. I think the Board of Supervisors will get there with you all. It'll take us a little bit more time to do it. But we have been over this and over this and over this, and I've been in meetings, and we just been in a lot of meetings trying to get this done. So I think we are going to get to that point to give you the money, and I think we can do that without raising taxes, I believe. And I think, and I don't want to overspeak for the Board of Supervisors here, but I think we're going to be able to somewhat get back out of trying to tell you, going back to something Mr. Claiborne said, trying to tell you all what to do. That's you all's business. The Board of Supervisors has nothing to do with who you're going to get to build this great school, who is going to renovate it. That's not our business, that's your business. Our business and our responsibility as a Board of Supervisors is to look at the figures and see, and I think we have said that, and see what can we do to help them out. And that's what we're supposed to do. And as Board of Supervisors, let us do our job to the school board and make sure that they don't come short and we don't come short, and we come to a conclusion. We have been talking about this thing for over a year and a half, and I think as the gentleman stated so eloquently on the end, and I know we backed it up, there was already in the figures, but if you keep on waiting and waiting, you're gonna be another 2.8, another 2.5, another 2.5. Somewhere we got to stop and make a decision. So I'm done. We're gonna turn it over to the school board.
I would like to make a comment.
You may.
I'm assuming my supervisors are allowed to make comments?
You may.
Okay, thank you. been a lot of discussion on this, and it's without a doubt that our school system needs enhancements, salary-wise, facility-wise, in many, many areas. The part of this discussion that has been neglected, I think, is the extreme, not extreme, but the other end of the financial discussions. I don't think that there has been a full disclosure or a full discussion of what's involved and the pricing for a rebuild, enhance, whatever the right fancy word would be for reworking the high school. And part of the thing that bothers me that has been overlooked in the public discussions and the information to the public is that there is a considerable cost in their taxes going from the cost of redoing an existing fine facility with some major treatments to a new school. You know, new school is all we've been hearing for a couple of years, and I understand the school system's propaganda barrage in those respects. But I think as the Board of Supervisors, as the direct link to the public finances, part of our due diligence is to investigate fully the financial implication of some of these decisions. And with the new recent weekly or last week's discussions about the effects of the full amount of the penny sales tax and all the other things, I think that's great news. I think what we need to look at is what could be the effects on our county finances if we did an adequate rebuild, refurbish, re-enhancement of the high school here. And that could translate into several cents on our real estate rate. And that has not been disclosed or discussed in the public. But I'm not saying that I'm an absolute advocate for that, but I am an absolute advocate for that being discussed publicly. That needs to be part of the discussion with our citizens and our taxpayers. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right.
Can I make that one more comment?
Okay, you're gonna be the last one. Go ahead.
And I got one more too.
I'm just letting the public know that we're just gonna be operating within that penny. That penny the school board is entitled to anyway. We can't do anything else with that.
Absolutely.
But my job is to do what's in the best interest of the county in terms of financing. But the Board of Supervisors can't do a thing with that penny because that penny is entitled to go to the school board. And that's where I'm operating within those bounds. I cannot, as I said, once they get the funding, I can't tell them what to do or how to do, or when to do. They're going to have to be accountable to the public for that. But that one penny is nothing. We can do what we have to designate that money for the school board to do either the renovation or new school. So that's where I'm at right now. And I'm just trying to simplify so everybody will understand where I stand. We cannot do anything with that penny. The school board cannot decide what they're going to do with any funding they get in relation to that penny.
All right, Mr. Francisco, go right ahead.
I just want to speak on capital projects. I do want to come back around and talk about compensation before we leave here tonight. But I see number 3 under D, item D, says the Powell property purchase and funding. That's the 12 acres between the road and, I'm gonna say, the gas house, and Murphy's. I do believe that was a wise decision. I think you needed a buffer. That was the land coming down the road from the stoplight and turning. I would hate for someone to open a store, a vape shop, a whatever there in years to come, and the school didn't purchase that property. I think that was a wise decision. And in talking tonight, as far as getting into spending money and doing, you know, there's a couple avenues you can do as far as purchasing that property. I think you guys know this. But the penny sales tax cannot be used for purchasing this property unless it's included in your project for the new high school. I don't know that I agree if the building is there, me personally, because I don't know if I want the school right behind the gas house in Murphy's, or whatever may come behind there. You did not purchase the whole property. But before we can decide anything on that, we are going to, as in the board, I believe, we are going to have to see some plans, being that's a baseball field, that's a school, that's a parking lot, that's whatever, before penny sales tax can be released for that. I just wanted to point that out.
All right, thank you. Mrs. Trader, thank you.
Yes, to speak.
I'm going to attempt to circle back to where I think we are on the agenda. Where I think we are on the agenda is the briefing from the Joint Facilities Committee. So I want to start by reiterating what Mr. Short and Mr. Claiborne said, and that I do want the full boards to know, both boards to know, that we have reviewed this information extensively. We've reviewed it time and time and time again. I think Dr. Lindenberg's commented that we've had 150-plus meetings on the high school, and that includes renovated, new schools, whatever, anything to do with the high school. But I do want to let everyone know that we've had an extensive review of these numbers, to the point that I think that most of us who've been on that Joint Facilities Committee, we could rattle these numbers off in our sleep. We do know the numbers. We've looked at them. I do understand that it is wise, in all likelihood, for both boards to have the chance to go back and review the numbers and get as comfortable with those numbers as we are. Although at the same time, I fully recognize that time is really important, because every moment we wait, there's increased expenditures or more money that's going to be required. So I wanted to point out a couple things. As part of the review of those numbers, I want to say this goes back to a few years ago, maybe 3 years ago, with a Mosley report. The renovation number that was given to us was $78 million. So, and Dr. Lindenberg can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but from what I recall a few years ago, it was 75 to 78 million for that renovation. So we have looked at what we feel is a real number based on the best information that we could obtain. We went outside and we requested the number, and that's what was given to us. As Mr. Francisco said, we're looking at probably somewhere around 85 million for the actual cost of a new school. When you go looking at the 118 number, he pointed out a lot of things that were included in that number, but something that he failed to mention would be things as simple as furnishing the building once you build it. I mean, you're looking at 10–15% of your total project just to furnish the building. So, that's important. As you can imagine, this day and time, it's not as simple as replacing with a chair. You have a lot more advanced needs that you probably had than you had 20 years ago, more technical needs. So that's important to realize that 118 million, or wherever that number actually is, 115, 112, whatever we settle on, that the number does include furnishing the building as well. Last thing with that number, I know a few of you have asked that we give you a more definitive number. I would only say that providing that definitive number that you desire is difficult until we really determine the method of construction. And that's something that, as a school board, we're looking at right now. We're looking at it. We've looked at it with the last few Joint Facility Committee meetings. We're trying to determine, I don't think any of us have a preference what the method of construction is, but we want to make sure that we choose the correct method. Whatever that may be, we want to make sure that we get this right. We understand that we need to be good stewards of the public money, the public's money, and we understand the value of making sure that we choose the best construction method that allows us input up front, it allows us the best financing, and it allows us ultimately the best project to last us the next 30 to 50 years. So that's something that I do think is important. When you ask what the final number is, well, that's something that we're trying to get to, and we're trying to do that appropriately and wisely. The last thing I wanted to point out from the Joint Facilities Committee meeting, and again, it was 3 members from the Board of Supervisors and 3 members from the school board. One thing that I was very pleased with is throughout that process, there was a strong spirit of cooperation. I mean, we jumped in and everyone worked together, all 6 of us, and And I would throw in Mr. Simpson and Dr. Lindenberg as well. You know, we worked diligently. We worked well together. We really showed the cooperation throughout this committee process. That's the spirit of cooperation that I hope that we see moving forward. I think as members of both boards, we have an opportunity, and I've said this to several people and say it anytime that I have the opportunity in public, we have the opportunity to set this county up for the next 30 to 50 years if we can work together, be diligent, be responsible, but work together the same way we did through the Joint Facilities Committee, through that process. If we can do that in the next month or so and make the best decision for the county, whatever that may be. But to display that same spirit of cooperation that I was proud that we displayed throughout the joint committee process.
I have a comment.
Yes, ma'am.
We talked about renovating, well, the school board voted on a new high school, but it appears as though that the board of supervisors is really leaning toward renovating. And the one thing that comes to my mind in this high school is security. And there are so many hidden places in this building. If we were to have an active shooter, and I hate to say that if we were to lose one of our kids, no one could offer me $141 million for my child. That life is more important. And what if, when we open up this building, we run into the same problems that you all ran into at the courthouse? When we're talking about renovating, we're talking about transplanting children in portables. That's $3 or $4 million lost in portables. You think about the security there. And I would hate to see us open up this building and then we incur, you know, some astronomical costs. We don't have any place to pull money from. And then we really would be looking at a property increase, a property tax increase. So we need to consider this, because this building is not conducive to safety for a child, the way that it was designed back in the 1970s. And I know that, and by the time that you get through with renovating, I think the cost when we compare renovate to new, it was like $3 or $4 million. It wasn't a tremendous difference.
I'd like to respond to that comment first of all, and I can't speak for everybody, just speak for myself. But I think it's a little unfair, myself, to feel as though the board is recommending renovated versus new. I think that's a school board decision.
Well, we gave it to you.
And certainly we understand, and I respect the decision, that you chose to build new.
Right.
And I would just ask that the board respect the funding that we will be able to find adequate for all of us in community.
Okay, very good.
May I just say, and one thing I'd like to emphasize, as I just stated earlier, all we're gonna do is funding, Ms. Coleman.
Okay.
That's y'all's decision to do what y'all gonna do after the funding. So that's all we're dealing with. And that's what Mr. Brandon was telling you. The board has not made a formal decision as to whether or not they want to build a new. That's not our decision. That's not our decision. Okay.
Mr. Camp?
Thank you. Thank everybody for being out here tonight. I just want to make a comment. I was on the Joint Facilities Committee with Ms. Coleman and Mr. Lloyd, and I first of all came to the school board. When I first came to the school board, I was not in favor of a new school. But due to the hard work of Dr. Lindenberg and the community and Mr. Edmonds, we got the sales tax was passed. Basically, I was thinking that was the only source of funding that we were going to have is sales tax. Okay, you know, and we've seen that we could get up $91 million to $100 million with just funding sales tax. Now, as far as respecting the board, as far as what you all are providing for us, that extra $2.2 million, thank you. Because that, I mean, we wouldn't be sitting here if it wasn't for that. With that sales tax and the debt service coming off like it is, I mean, we're actually sitting here together. Because I remember when we were instructed not to talk to the Board of Supervisors, okay? So, I mean, it's a remarkable feat just to be sitting here in this room and talking like this. So, I would like to say that, you know, we do have some renovation figures, and I'll be glad to give them to you after the meeting, Mr. Ricketts. But, you know, it was a comment that was made, one by a fellow board member and one by a supervisor. In the course of all these meetings that we have had, Mecklenburg County is building a brand-new school, two brand-new schools, $150 million. That's going to be a brand-new complex. We've lost a lot of teachers to Mecklenburg County. And a comment was made, a couple comments were made, just think the number of teachers that we're going to lose because they get paid better in Mecklenburg County, and they're also going to have new facilities. So, you know, that just kind of stuck with me and resonated with me. But, you know, the Joint Committee has, I think, done good work, and it's just like Mr. Brandon is saying, you know, we've got some gaps we got to fill in, and just get the facts, and when the facts present themselves, the solution is, I've always heard that it was easy. So, but I appreciate the work of both these boards and the Joint Committee, and that's just my observation for the Joint Committee. Thank you.
Yes, sir, Mr. Camp.
Just one more thing. And all of this is being done without an increase in real estate tax. I mean, that's amazing as far as a brand new building and not having an increase in real estate tax. Thank you.
Mr. Pennell, can I say something? I just wanted to chime in just for a second for what Mr. Camp said. When I ran in 2019, one of the things that I wanted to see happen is this right here. All of us together can help these people out here. The key is working together. And I think, you know, there's differing views, different points of view to look at, but I think we can come up with a solution that's good for these people. So I just want to chime in and with Mr. Camp and say, I'm glad to see this. I want it to continue. Thank you, Mr. Pennell.
Mr. Pennell? And Madam Chair, is it possible for us to move on to compensation so that we can at least take care of that tonight? Because I think there's more discussion about the building and renovate, about new building and funding and all of that kind of stuff.
Mr. Pennell, do you feel comfortable in doing that?
I do. Do the board feel comfortable in moving forward and talk about compensation at this time?
Absolutely.
Okay. That's next on the agenda. Let's move. Okay, we can do it.
Okay. Been waiting for how long to do this evening? Y'all bear with me just for 1 minute. Good evening, everybody. My part in this meeting is to address compensation for our employees. And as I begin, I want the Board of Supervisors and our board to think back when you were in school. And I want you to think about that one person in your school history that changed your life. That one person that took the time, that extra time to help you through something that you were having a problem with. Think about that person while I'm running my mouth, because I'm going to come back to it. At the present time, we have the potential for 71 employees to retire this year. That's all employees, not just teachers. Might be a little more, might be a little less. As we all know, Social Security and VRS uses the last 3 years of employment to base the monthly retirement benefit. Because of this, we need to begin our compensation package in January. If we don't, I want to give you a scenario of what might happen in August of 2022. Mr. Camp, this is when you and your granddaughter come into play. August of 2022, Mr. Camp and his granddaughter are getting ready to go to school. He gets up, makes sure she's got all her things together, gives her a breakfast and says, okay, now go on out and wait for the bus. She stands out for 45 minutes. Bus doesn't show up. She comes back in and says, Grandpa, bus didn't come pick me up. Mr. Camp scratches his head, says, well, come on, darling. Before he does that, picks up the telephone, he calls Tammy Moore, who is our transportation person. She says, Mr. Camp, I'm sorry. I'm just as sorry as I can be, but we do not have any bus drivers to come and take your route. So you're going to have to take your granddaughter to school. So Mr. Camp puts his granddaughter in his car. They drive to Cedar Jennings. I'm using Cedar Jennings because that's my school. They walk in, go into the office. There is no secretary. Mrs. McFadden, who is our secretary there, is awesome, just in case you didn't know that. Mr. Camp looks around. He says, come on, let's go down the hallway. They're walking down the hallway, and he sees Miss Owen, our principal there. And she has just a massive amount of bundles of papers and pencils and all kinds of things in her hand. And Mr. Camp walks up with his granddaughter, and he says, Miss Owen, can you tell me where my granddaughter is supposed to go this morning? And she's fumbling around with the papers trying to answer his question. He says, wait a minute. Why don't you just go in the office there and pull it up on the computer and it'll be done? She says, Mr. Camp, the individuals who work at the STEM Center where all the computer stuff is hooked up, they're not there anymore. Mr. Camp scratches his head again while Ms. Owen is trying to answer his question. She finally finds where his granddaughter is supposed to go, so they walk into the classroom, and there's no teacher. And Miss Owen looks at Mr. Camp. Mr. Camp looks at her, and she says, Mr. Camp, we don't have any teachers on this end of the hallway. We only have 3, and we're trying to divide all of our kids so that they'll be equally divided in the classroom. I'm not going to go any further. I think you get the picture. Are you still thinking about that person who changed your life in school? Do you have that person in your head? Because I'm going to come back to it at the end of this. My father was a wise man. He shared many things with me when he was on this earth. And one of the things he shared was this. Kathy, we were here, we were put on this earth to help one another. That's our purpose, to help each other. Every single day, every single employee that we have has a purpose, and that purpose is to educate our children. I don't know if you know this or not, but they start at 7:30 in the morning, and they leave bodily at 3:30 in the afternoon. They take everything home with them and wait till they've taken care of their families before they start on the work from that day. They don't eat. Well, that's wrong. If you think shoving an apple in your mouth or a package of nabs or downing a drink, if you think that's eating, then yeah, they eat. They have lesson plans that are covered by Zoom, direct instruction, any way and every way they possibly can to teach our children. They have no planning periods. They have no lunchtime. Now for you, that may be okay, but for me as a former teacher, that's really tough. Their purpose is to educate our children. That's the reason for getting up in the mornings. Now, I'm going to ask you, do you remember that person that turned a light bulb on in your mind? Was it a secretary? Was it a parapro? Was it a custodian? Was it a cafeteria worker? Was it a teacher? Was it a principal? Somebody, Mr. Claiborne, put the idea in your head that you could be an attorney. Mr. Simpson, somebody made you think that you were really super with numbers, and you are. Mr. Short, somebody gave you the idea that your job was to be involved in banking, and from what I've heard, you did a wonderful job. This compensation package can be paid by the school system, if I'm hearing Dr. Lindbergh correctly. We can fund this. Please give this to our teachers and our employees beginning in January. Thank you.
Madam Chair, you have so eloquently laid out that story. At our facility meeting, Mr. Simpson stated that we needed $400,000, and Dr. Lindenberg was able to identify $600,000 because there were 11 positions that we did not fill this year, so we can apply that money. Also, I need to point out that I'm a former teacher, and I know that they are working under stress. I know that they are because they're trying to fill a hole of a lack of knowledge that children, the instruction that they did not get during the pandemic. Then also, you're taking the necessary precautions to prevent the spread of COVID. And at the same time, you're trying to bring them up to the level that they will be successful at the end of course test. So then you're substituting because the pool of substitutes thin. There are no substitutes. And on top of all of that, you have to deal with discipline problems. So it is with great pleasure that we implement the scale that Dr. Lindenberg has published so that our teachers will be competitive with all of the counties connecting to us, inclusive of North Carolina. And I would like to put that motion on the floor that those salary scales will be implemented first semester of January. You said January of next year. I would like to put that motion on the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Potts. Is there any discussion?
You need to make one correction on this motion. It's not just the salary of the teachers, it's the salary for everybody.
Yeah.
Yes.
Make sure we understand. Yeah. Thank you, but I'm not telling you this for your applause. I'm telling you because that's what we need to do.
Yeah.
That's what we need to do. So make sure y'all understand that because I understand it. And you understand that we need to make sure that we take care of all our employees that work here. That's including the teachers, the janitors, the bus drivers, everybody. The kitchen workers, the people that clean up, that a friend of mine used to call the dog and donkey work. We need to pay them folks. And we need to give them the money they need to get. So we need to go and get this passed tonight and go on about something else because we don't need to keep going over this. Because if we do, we're gonna fool around and try to cut some money out of it. Because that's what we do. That's exactly
Mr.
what we do.
Potts, I will amend my motion reference teachers, but it's inclusive of all, teachers and staff. So I'll amend that.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Is there any more discussion?
Yes.
I have one thing to say. First and foremost, I just want to thank, Dr. Martin for the time, the hard work and the time and effort that he put into it to find the money, and dealing with a lot of other projects along the way, including coming along and substituting this building as well, as a substitute. I still say that he's about the best superintendent in the state of Virginia. And I think Halifax County is fortunate to have someone like Scott. So we should be very thankful for that. Thank you, Mark.
Yep. I just,
Mr. Lloyd?
my only point was going to be to make sure that we explain how we're going to implement this compensation. And basically that we were going to be using the capital carryover that we've recognized that so that we can, for at least we anticipate for up to 3 years, that we can fund the salary scale. So I know that's really important to,
Can you use capital?
I'm sorry.
You said capital carryover?
We're using the money that was left over.
Not capital.
I'm sorry.
But just leftover money.
Money remaining that was authorized, we're using those funds left over from unused funds, let me rephrase, unused funds to fund this for up to 3 years. So again, I know it's been important tonight that we talk about taxes and whatnot, so that we're utilizing unused funds to fund the salary scale for up to 3 years.
Mr. Potts? Mr. McDowell?
Yes, I got one thing. I'm very supportive of our teachers. I think our teachers need to get a good raise, but there's one thing that I don't have. I want to see what our bus and car drivers are getting. I do not have anything on that, and I have asked for it. But I want to make sure that our car and bus drivers are taken care of. A lot of these salaries are very, very generous. And I think more of this salaries, as I call the top brass, needs to go to the bus, car, our teachers, custodians. So I think we need to look at this scale again, and let's see what we can trim off, and let's help these other people that have been left behind so long. Thank you.
Can we go for?
Any other comments?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
So, just a quick question. Looking at the numbers and pulling it up, we're talking about 2.7 million a year for the salaries. And first of all, thank you, teachers, staff, principals, bus drivers, everybody, the work that you guys are doing. I would not want to do it. Thank you very much for taking care of our kids. So that being said, 2.7 million a year. Earlier in the discussion, Mr. Brandon, you mentioned that we can fund the salary compensation. So before we use the unspent funds that are in reserve for the school system, is that something that the Board of Supervisors is willing and able to fund these salary increases now, starting in January, starting in July? Where are you able to fund this?
We're going to allow the chair of the Finance Committee to answer that question. Go right ahead, Mr. Francisco.
Yes, absolutely. We are prepared to take these savings to fund the teachers' salaries. These savings right here, you guys can cover it for the next 3 years, I understand. With no cost, no increase, you have these savings to cover this salary compensation package. The discussion that our board is not 100% on, can I say this today, is whether it starts in January or it starts in July next fiscal year. That's what but no, I believe the board is in favor of the using this $3.3 million, $3.2 million to do the salary adjustments.
Mr. Francisco?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Simpson, How much did you say we need to fund it at January 1? How much money?
You all are talking totally different numbers than you've ever talked about, so that's why I'm sitting down here.
Did you not say it was 400,000 that we needed?
No, I did say you need 400,000 for a half a year. The information I have, and I'm glad I'm good with numbers because
Okay.
you are correct, Ms. Fred.
Okay.
My understanding is that it costs to implement the compensation for solely the teachers is $1.8 million per year. Is that correct? Okay, thank you. $1.8 million. The school system, as I understand it, has 10 unfilled positions that total about $500,000 that is currently in the budget that you're putting towards the $1.8 million. The school system has the ability to, as I understood it, to offer a retirement incentive to encourage up to about another 20 or 30 employees to retire early earlier than they would normally would, and then be able to backfill them with employees and teachers that are paid less, obviously, with less tenure. That was going to total roughly about another $500,000 to $600,000 of annual savings. That hasn't happened yet, so I don't know where y'all have that money. So the third piece of that is roughly $800,000. It's $750,000, $800,000 that you all needed from the Board of Supervisors to fund a full year of teacher compensation. So the $400,000 that I came up with at the meeting the other day is if you want to implement halfway through the year in January, you need $400,000 from the Board of Supervisors to do that. You also need to find the other $500,000 within your budget of savings in order to make it $900,000 to support the entire salary compensation that you all have put together. So, what we have talked about, I have talked about with the finance chair when he asked me how we could fund this, is you have $3.2 million in round numbers available from unused local effort from the previous couple years. $800,000 per year for each of the next 3 fiscal years. So that's fiscal year 23, 24, and 25 could be dedicated to the school system, $800,000 each year, and that's $2.4 million. So that gets you all 3 years down the road with county support to implement the compensation plan. And the $400,000 that you are asking for to implement it early this year could come from that, and that makes 2.8. So that 2.8 versus the 3.2, 3.3 number that's out there leaves you about $500,000 available to put towards your retirement incentive to try to compensate for early retirements or give incentive for early retirements. So the numbers from that aspect work. The question that, I've got 2 questions in my mind now, but to implement it early, the school system needs $500,000 in your current budget that you don't expect to expend to match with the $400,000 from the Board of Supervisors in order to implement early. If y'all can do that, that's great. To go into the next fiscal year, which we'll be budgeting here in the next few months, so for fiscal year 23, you've got $1.1 million to come up with in your current existing budget. So if you all feel you can do that within your budget, as I've heard tonight, that you can fund it within your budget, then I feel, or I'm guessing or hearing that the Board of Supervisors may be willing to give that $800,000 for the next few years. What that does, though, to our citizens is if after 3 years from now, you all have not been able to absorb that entire $1.8 million in your budget, then that puts that back in the lap of somebody to fund, which then goes to where do you find the money? So, and that circles back to all this other stuff we talked about, which is high school, elementary schools, everything else. If there's operational savings that can be had, that's how you backdoor into some of this funding that you utilize. But now all we've talked about, and I've talked about with Dr. Lindenberg, is teacher compensation. I heard just now that it's for all employees. Well, last I heard, you need another $700,000 or $800,000 from the Board of Supervisors annually in order to fund for everybody else. So that would mean to implement early, you need another $350, and to implement over the next 3 fiscal years until you can get within your budget, you're gonna need another $2.1 million. I don't know where that's coming from. So I think we're talking a lot different than we talked last week and have been talking. You know, Mark and I have worked on this stuff. I sleep and dream these numbers. And you just don't, the funding is not there to do it without coming up with additional revenues to take care of all of that. So that's my speech.
I have a question. Is the 1.8, I've been told that the 1.8 is for everyone, bus drivers, custodians, everything.
So everything we've built has been for all, and I think it's often been couched in teacher pay, but it's been built for all. And we talked about reduction in positions, saving $500,000 a year one-time retirement incentive, building in $600,000 a year for 1.1. And originally we had a Board of Supervisors investment of $764,000, which was 2 cents, is what we said, 2 cents per proposal. So that was originally from the July 12th from the July 12th document that we voted on as a board and later on. So that was that. And so you take that 764 and then you back into it over 3 years. At the same time, we had in that same memo from July 12th, we said the cost to support for the proposed graded pay plan is $797. Should there be an additional funding from vacancies, retirement, additional supports, additional funding for salaries designated for state for fiscal year 2023, the top priority for the school division will be to address support staff and then administrative salaries. So you had support staff and first, so we said when we get new funding that would come in, then the top priority, if you backed into it, or you had 2 cents, then the extra funding you would have from the state would go to support staff, and then that's how you built your scale. So that would still be our same priority, hadn't changed at all. So you're just replacing the 764, backing into it with capital carryover, delaying either tax increase or whatever you do to reduce funds in the schools in the future. So that would cover that. So how do you get to the current is you have, as you said, we have 10 positions at $600,000 that we didn't fill. That was intentional. That was intentional because we knew going into it we didn't want to reduce people at the end. So that was intentional going into the summer. We knew we were trying to build to a salary scale. So you have 600,000, okay? And then you have 800,000 times 3 is 2.4. So you have 9 million left over, and then you have the retirement incentive in there. So you're all, it's close. However you are, you're in the ballpark to be able to accomplish this if you so desire.
Madam Chair, if I may?
Yes, Ms. Shotwell, I'm sorry.
Thank you. So, we lost 70 teachers at the start of this school year. 70 staff. We will not have a school if we cannot keep our teachers in Halifax County. Teachers, bus drivers, districts are shutting down days at a time because they don't have bus drivers to get them to school. They're shutting down because they don't have teachers that are at work and able to work, and there is no school. There is no way that we can keep running this school system if we do not pay our teachers and our staff. The only way to do that is to pay them starting in January, or we're going to lose even more people, and we cannot afford to lose any more staff. However, we have to pay for this, and I apologize, because we should have had this laid out. I'm trying to pull all these numbers together and figure out what it is. Going forward, I think as a board, we need to do better to put it in writing exactly what we're asking for and bring it every time we have a presentation. Every time we make a motion, we need to have it in writing exactly what we're asking for and what's included so that we don't have mistakes over with the 1.9 or the 800 or the 2.9. Get it all together and put it down. So going forward, we will do that. That is my pledge. what I'm asking for is consensus and agreement and approval to approve the salary increases. We still have some questions about the non-teacher increases. It's a range, so it's hard to see exactly what those increases are for those staffs, and that's something that I'm working with Dr. Lindberg on to get that detail. We have high level, we don't have the details, but we need to approve this. We need to get it through, or we will not have school.
Send you all the letters of intent. When do they go out? February, March?
Mark is saying February and March.
Yeah. We'll probably lose some more too.
Any other discussion? Al?
Are you all gonna make a motion, or can I make a comment? Whichever.
I don't think we motioned a second.
And the motion is there.
If we gonna vote or what, I don't know.
Okay, I'm just, yeah, y'all go ahead, and you all take care of your business.
Go in and vote.
Let's hear your comment first. Sir, please.
All right.
Let's hear your comment first.
No, the only comment I was gonna make is, I'm kinda concerned too about losing more teachers, next year. So, you know, and when we look at the overall, it needs to be, I mean, we say teachers, these parapros, these bus drivers, these custodians, they work their hind parts off. So they definitely need to be included in whatever you all might decide to do. Thank you.
Is there any further discussion?
Can I make one comment? It was the board's understanding that tonight, the only thing that we were supposed to be voting on was half pay to $400,000. That's why there's confusion for give the teachers their compensation for a half year. And that's where the confusion comes, as Ms. Shotwell says. Our understanding that tonight we would the only vote on giving that $400,000 to supplement, giving the teachers the increase for a half a year. So that's where the problem is, because that was the understanding of this board.
Okay.
And she made a good suggestion about from now on, and this applies to both boards, we should put it in writing so we can understand what was happening. But that was our understanding, that we were just going to vote tonight on giving you permission or allowing you to do the $400,000 for January for the teachers only. Is that correct? Is that correct, Mr. Simpson?
Yeah, I think what was on the agenda tonight was a discussion about compensation and the school board to present their compensation plan and needs, and then the Board of Supervisors the ability to discuss how you're asked to fund it.
All right, so, Ms. Coleman, can I get you to restate your motion again, please?
Oh, I motion that we implement the salary scales for teacher staff first semester, January of next year.
Is there a second?
Again, Madam Chair, we left off the fact that you just said teachers, you said.
Teacher, I said
She
teacher
had said staff.
And staff.
Yes.
We can't get involved with that.
Second motion.
Any discussion? All right.
We got to have a meeting.
Mr. Simpson, if you don't mind, can you restate what you said, the last comment you made there?
Yes, sir. First off, I'm not against this. I want this to work, and I've been over backwards trying to figure out how to make sure we can fund this. So I want to make sure everybody understands that. If you agree to do something half a year now, somebody has to commit to sustain that, because you're not going to take it away next year. You're not going to take it away the year after. So if the school system wants to implement this, that's you all's vote to do that. If you need funding to do that, then somebody needs to ask the Board of Supervisors for a certain amount of funding to sustain this for some period of time. And then if that can be afforded, then I believe the Board of Supervisors is understanding as to what that ask is. I do not believe, from my understanding of the numbers, that the school system can afford to give increases to every school employee, from the teachers to everybody else that works everywhere, support staff and all that. I do not believe you have the funding to do that in your current budget, and the Board of Supervisors definitely does not have enough in carry forward money to support that either, because my understanding again is that it takes $1.8 million to implement the teacher scale. Of that, the ask is, and I'm using round numbers, $800,000 from the Board of Supervisors to support that. So between January 1 in a month from now and July 1, 7 months from now, this Board of Supervisors is asked to come up with basically $1.2 million out of the carry forward fund to fund teachers. If the rest of the support staff costs another $790 or something thousand to implement, then if you all want to do that tomorrow and it's in your budget and you can find it in your budget, then have at it. You don't need the Board of Supervisors to do that. But if you need that $700,000 or $800,000 from that in order to sustain the motion that's being put on the floor now, I don't know where the money is.
So will the money be there if we say July?
If you do, well, that's what we've said all along, is that if there's $800,000 that you all need each fiscal year to sustain or to implement the salaries, then for fiscal year 23, 24, and 25, I believe the Board of Supervisors is likely willing to say $800,000 a year for those 3 years.
Okay.
But it's got to be sustainable. So in 26, your group of 8 has to figure out how you're going to absorb that money into the budget. That's what it's all about. And then if you add all the other staff to it, then now that $800,000 turns into $1.6 million, and that's got to be sustained every year, even starting next year. So I'm not against it. I've been over backwards trying to figure out how to fund it, but I just don't see the numbers working for as large of an ask that it is.
So if I may add, from what I was understanding, Dr. Lindenberg, that basically we needed to ask of the Board of Supervisors was for the use of that 764 for the next each year for the next 3 years. Is that correct?
Yes. And then as I said here, then we would figure out the other savings through additional state fundings that come in, and that would be our priority if we had that 764 or 2 cents.
So I guess our question to the Board of Supervisors needs to be, is that 764 each year for the next 3 years, is that a reasonable ask? And if so, I guess our motion would need to be amended to reflect that we would need that $764,000 each year for the next 3 years to fund the salary scale that I think everybody in this room wants to see us put in play. So I guess our question to the Board of Supervisors would be, is that $764,000, is it available to the school board?
I think you could give them 400 now to do it mid-year, then 8 times 3 to do it. I think that's
No. So when I came in this meeting tonight, I have an understanding that you're using 764, I'm gonna say 800. You guys have 3.2, what Mr. Simpson just said, you guys have $3.2 million in savings. No tax increase, no extra money, 3 years at 800,000 is $2.4 million. You can fund this, okay? You can fund this out of the savings, as well as an additional roughly $500,000 for the retirement incentive that we talked about earlier, for the retiring teachers. And also, obviously, we talked 800 as an entire year, 400 as a half a year. So we're gonna say 400 will be January 1st till June when school gets out. and then I've heard that it's gonna need another 750,000, and if you include everyone, the 1.9 is 8. So if the school board, like you just stated, can sustain this with their $3.2 million in savings in the next 3 years, that gives you guys 3 years to figure out how to continue it, then yes.
It's teachers only. That's not.
But that is,
Yeah, yeah.
that is teachers only, is that correct?
That's right, that's what I thought.
The memorandum, January 12th, presented October 25th, and I submitted to the Board of Supervisors, says 764, 2 cent one time, or 764. So you're saying we don't want to give 2 cents, so we're going to delay it, and we'll do 764, 800,000 for 3 years. That's for teacher salary, okay? And then we said in there, if you did that, then our boards, this is exactly what it said that our board then would make any additional funding we had from state funds that come in each year, then because you have 800,000, and in essence, that's 2 cents. You have that each year for next 3 years, so that sustains that. We said if we had additional state funding, this is in the memo, it says we would utilize that for support staff and administrative adjustments. So it's the game that you play. It's, you know, so you got that funding. That's what we spelled out in July. That's what our board voted on to do it. So that's how the math works. So each year we have additional funding from the state that comes in. We have in the past. When it comes in the past we put it towards teacher salary. Well, if you give 800,000 a year, then that builds a scale. 800,000 builds it plus 500,000 from potential savings of 10 positions, which we have and have a memo here. And plus, if you have a one-time retirement incentive, you're going to hire, if you lose 30 teachers at 60,000, and you hire them in at 41,000, 40,000, that's 20,000 in savings per teacher. That's 600,000. So that was the model that we built in July that we've shared, and so forth. So anyway, that's yeah.
So in order for you to sustain the 3 years of the teachers and staff and everyone raises, that's including a 2 cent tax increase. Is that what you're telling me tonight?
No, that was the original proposal, was a 2 cents tax increase, okay? And then there wasn't, I wouldn't say, well, never. So at the same time, we had almost 3.3 million in what was original capital carryover, leftover funding, and so forth. So that gives you the back end. It was a back end. So we talked about originally 800,000 and backing in 1 cent 1 year and then 1 cent the next year. That was the original concept. So now you say, well, I got it through 3 years. And then at that time, the school board, what you're saying is the school board within 3 years needs to have a plan on how to sustain it. Okay.
So we're not involved.
What, will you want me to rescind the motion? What do you want me to do?
So what I'd like to say, the Board of Supervisors, I believe, as a whole, is in favor of giving the school board letting them use their $3.2 million in savings to fund this package for the next 3 years. I believe that absolutely. You know, I've been in Mr. Lloyd's, Mr. Lindenberg, Dr. Lindenberg's ear since I've been on this board. This is so important to me. If I could start this yesterday, if I could have started it last year, I would have did it in a minute. This is so important to me, and I'm so glad that we're at this point now. This has been very important to me my 4 years on this board. So, but as I stated a minute ago, the question that this board is having is are we in favor of starting in January or waiting until? I feel very confident starting in July, no doubt about it. But the question is whether we as a board will support it to start in January. I am in favor of it starting today or January or ASAP.
So basically, all we will be doing is giving them permission to use the carryover funds tonight.
So,
Have no
so
problem with that.
doing some rough math, we're talking 2.7 million a year, plus a half year of 1.5 is roughly 10 million for the next 3 years that we need to fund. We are at 3.2 million. That's the capital carryover or the unused fund over the last several years. We have the Board of Supervisors, you've said 800,000 per year for the next 3 years, plus 400,000 for this half year, which gets us to 6 million. 600,000 from the unpaid salaries from this year, plus 600,000 estimate for the salaries for retirement, assuming that our teachers leave us, preferably they don't, but if they do, that is savings from their salaries. That gets us to 7.4 million, not 10. So unless I'm missing something, we need to find some way to do this.
So we can stand in and say July 2022?
July isn't gonna make a bit of difference because it's 1.5 million to do it in January instead of July. We still have 10 million. So if you back that off, it's still 8.5 million, and we don't have 8.5 million from those numbers. Unless I'm missing something, which it could be because I'm scribbling these notes, we don't have the funds in the school board savings right now to be able to fund this for the next 3 years before we get approval from the Board of Supervisors to pull that. And even at 3 years, I believe you're saying we need to absorb that in the budget, which means we don't unless we raise taxes or we close the elementary schools, which will also mean we lose teachers. That's not a win-win situation. It's not even a win-lose. It's a lose situation. We need to find another solution.
Mr. Chairman, if I can correct one item.
You may say, go right ahead.
Ms. Shotwell, you double dipped into the $3.2 million of carryover, because the $3.2 million of carryover is how the Board of Supervisors is funding the $800,000 per year plus the retirement incentive of $500,000 plus the mid-year implementation of $400,000.
Thank you, because
So-
that makes
So it
a
makes
big
your numbers
difference.
worse, unfortunately, but that's the correct number.
So basically, you were gonna give us the money that we already have. You were just approving that we could use it.
Yes, the protocol is that any savings, technically, any savings of the school system are to be used for capital. And then there have been times in the past that the school system has come in and requested to utilize those funds on capital and/or other items. So I would imagine that the discussions today would maybe culminate in a request to utilize those carryover funds for compensation and to be appropriated into certain categories. And that's another item I want to bring. If we're talking about just teachers, then the Board of Supervisors would need to appropriate that into the instruction category. And if we're talking about other support staff, then we're gonna know how that 800,000 gets split between categories because of how the budget is categorically funded.
Can I ask how many staff Halifax County Public Schools employs?
Yeah, it's probably about 750 on any day. It's a rolling number, Ms. Shotwell. It depends on any day, but somewhere in the 750 to 800 depending.
Okay, so if we don't have a solution to do the salary increases, we need to do something. I don't know if it's a one-time bonus, something to show good faith that we're trying and that we have more work to do, obviously, but we have to do something. So if it's a one-time bonus, however much, times 750, if that's something that we can approve tonight, it's something to get us moving.
Let me chime in. I hate to do this to you all. This is getting to be a internal board decision among the school board, because it's kind of, that's exactly what it's getting to be. So we're going to ask, I believe the board is, as I'm listening to some of the board members, they're wanting you all to make that decision among yourselves, and we cannot assist you in that decision. So we're going to ask you all to go back and to make that decision of what is it that you want to do. I do want to add that there has been some more information coming to us tonight that we didn't have before in these 2x2 meetings and these joint meetings that we've been having. It has always been teachers' raises, and I understand wanting to give everybody a raise, and I would like to see everyone get one, but we're going into another territory that we was not privileged to until tonight. So, Mr. Brandon, you have something?
Yes, I first want to say that I'm very much in agreement with School Board Member Mr. McDowell. It's obvious that teachers and support staff, some which barely make $15,000 a year in the year 2021 is quite horrible. But my concerns, again, is getting back to funding, how you all, whatever you all decide to do is respected. But we have an $800,000 per year expense that you're looking for us to fund, because that will help you and your budget to be able to afford the raises. My question is the $800,000 per year that you're seeking from us to provide increases for teachers and staff, or teachers only?
I mean, back last year when you asked me to do this, the Board of Supervisors said, fix a teacher scale. Okay, that's what I try to do here, $764.02. Okay, you said back into it. Okay, so to get to the fix a teacher salary scale, we said that we would reduce positions 10. I have them in the budget. You see it. I have a document here. That's $500,000. So if you did a one-time incentive trade down, that's $600. That fixes the teacher scale. Okay, you said teacher scale. Okay, and you said for us to come up with the rest. Okay. All right. So I have in our budget, in this memorandum here, is clear that the cost for a graded pay plan is $797. Should there be additional funds for vacancies, retirement, and additional funding from the Board of Supervisors, these funds will go towards placement of support staff on the graded pay plan. In addition, if additional funding for salaries designated from the state fiscal year 2023, the top priority for the school division in the budget will be to address the support staff and then administrative salaries. Administrative pay will be addressed after support staff salaries have been aligned. And then I have it listed here and all the salaries attached in the back. Okay, so you said you were going to fix teacher salary, and then we said when we had additional state money in the future, then we would put it, the number one priority is if you helped us on that, we helping ourselves here to 1.1 million, then we would come up with the support staff. You know, that's, we continue to do that. With the additional state revenue, we would, that would be our number one priority then when we got that money. And that's what it says in the memo from July the 12th. The only thing that's inaccurate on July 12th is we originally said 2.57 million was the increase, or was the capital carryover. It's 3.3 million, and that number is likely lower as well. So again, I reference that July 12th memo. It was presented again on August 25th, and it was sent to everybody.
So, Dr. Lindberg, if really want to simplify things here, so in essence, if I understand you correctly, you're saying the $800,000 that you expect us to help you with is for teacher salary only, and you all would make up the difference on support staff.
Yeah, so we have tried.
Am I correct in my assumption?
That
Yes.
is correct.
Okay.
That's a very simplified version, yes.
I'll just rescind my motion, take it off the books.
I think we ought to take a leap of faith and vote for this tonight, and let's pass it for all employees. I don't think we should prolong this any longer.
Well,
I mean, I think we should vote tonight, and we'll cut costs where we need to cut. but I think these employees need this raise, or we're gonna lose some staff, and it's gonna be devastating to this county. So I put a motion on the floor that we pass this salary increase for all employees of Halifax County Schools. Somebody second it?
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Any discussion?
Are you putting a time when it should be implemented?
Starting in January,
Okay.
yes.
Ready for a vote?
Ready for a vote? Yes, Mr. Potts?
Board of Supervisors said they don't have the money for that. Did I? Did y'all not say that? That y'all don't have the money to go ahead and do anything for everybody January?
Well, in essence, the way I understand it, 800,000 would be to take care of the teachers' increases. Support staff is probably equally as much. So then you go from 800 to 1.6. But I understand from Superintendent Dr. Lenneberg that you all had the other 800,000, I guess. Do you all feel pretty confident that that's there within your budget?
Mr. Sampson, would you clarify that? I think you said it was going to come out of the capital carryover from the $800,000, is that correct?
I will try to clarify again.
Please do.
Okay, there is, if you want to know the exact numbers, there's $3,291,825.61 in the capital carryover fund, okay? That's supposed to go to capital, but the request can be made to utilize it for anything else, and if, it sounds like we're wanting to utilize it for operations. Awesome. Okay, the school numbers I've heard tonight, and the same numbers I've heard for months, is that the school system is asking the Board of Supervisors for $800,000, $764, but just $800,000 for the Board of Supervisors portion of funding increases for teachers. Okay. They would like you to raise taxes to do that. That's what their motion was, is for you all to raise taxes to do that. Okay. However, you have the carryover funds, and so if you dedicate $800,000 for the upcoming fiscal year, you dedicate $800,000 more for the next fiscal year, you dedicate $800,000 more for the following fiscal year, you can get 3 fiscal years down the road in order to give the school system time to figure out how to absorb that $800,000 into their budget to continue and sustain the teacher increases. If the school system would like to implement mid-year and do it in January 1, that costs half of that $800,000, it costs $400,000. We can fund that out of the capital carryover as well and give you the $400,000 to do that. What all that means is that you have a ticking time bomb at the end of the 3rd fiscal year, and the school system needs to figure out how to be more efficient with the funding that the Board of Supervisors gives the school system, because we have heard in multiple presentations that there are inefficiencies in the way that the elementary schools are operated, and there's potential savings there. So it's difficult for the Board of Supervisors to go ask for tax increases to their constituents when there are funds that are potentially available inside of the school system budget to sustain all of what we're talked about here. All of that, nothing I have said involves anything having to do with the additional $790,000 that's needed for all the other support staff and all of that. There is, I don't know anywhere that those funds exist. Unless you want to use one of the fiscal years of the $800,000 for the 3rd fiscal year of the carryover, which moves your ticking time bomb up a year and a half almost, And then that makes that time bomb twice as big, because now you gotta come up with $1.6 million and not the 800,000 that you were originally looking for. My job is to make sure that anything this Board of Supervisors funds does not come back to bite them in the future. And in my job, and I believe I was quoted in the paper saying this, and I stand by it, my job is to make sure that we protect our future selves from our present selves.
So I think I would actually change the amendment. Instead of asking for 800,000 a year, I would rather ask for 1.6 and let us implement the salary for all staff funded for the next 2 years out of the carryover funds, so that goes into it, add it to the 1.1 million savings per year that we're looking at for that. It's a risk for the county. It's a risk for the school board, because we need to find some way to fill this within the next 2 years to be able to fund this going forward. We can do it. Either we get community agreement to raise taxes, we hopefully not close the elementary schools, because I really don't want to do that. But it gives us at least another year to have a plan. I mean, at least give us 6 months so we can have a plan. Let's pay the teachers, pay the staff. We'll figure it out in the next 2 years. So the amendment would be, we approve the motion as it was stated, implement the salary increases for all staff as of January 1st. Board of Supervisors has to provide, or we ask for approval to use the capital carryover fund however much we need to until it's gone, and we'll fix it by then.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Lord.
In response to Ms. Shotwell, I guess my question I have two questions, one to the Board of Supervisors, one to Dr. Lindenberg. If we're asking for the $3.2, $3.3 million, do we necessarily need to put a time frame on that? We just know that, like you said, we have a ticking time bomb, so to speak, and we need to be working diligently to find ways to replace those money. But do we need to amend it to necessarily put a time frame on that? Or can we just expect to receive the 3.2, 3.3, expect to use the existing 3.2, 3.3 million? That would be my first question to the Board of Supervisors. And my second question, just as a school board member to Dr. Lindenberg, would be, can we afford this simply? I mean, if the answer is yes, then I think we can move forward with the motion.
I guess my frustration is that I've worked with the numbers from the sales tax and the 2.2 million, and Davenport said exactly what I said in here, except I was always conservative and the number was right. I said in here because the Board of Supervisors was specific in their requests as they wanted to fund teacher salary. So I said in there is that we would save $500,000 from potential savings of positions and $600,000 from doubling down on retirement, and that we would make the rest of our support staff the #1 priority when we got additional funding from the state. So half of 797 is 800. I know exactly what this number is. That's as high as you could possibly make it. As high as you could possibly make it. I wouldn't be here tonight if I didn't think we could do this. We have not only that, we have the 600,000 that we haven't filled this school year with 10 positions. We haven't used our substitute pay because we don't have substitutes. So I mean, I'm confident that we can do that, and the 3.2 million, and all along I said in here that you've got a decision to make as a county. You've got a decision to make this coming up as the will of the people on the future. 3.2 million it is going to run out at some point. You're either going to increase taxes or you're going to make your operation more efficient. That's up to you. But do I think we can do it? Yes, I think we can do it, because I've thought all along that this is how we're going to do it. We've planned it out as such for long periods of time.
If that's, could we call for a vote, Madam Chair?
Yes.
Yes. Can we have a vote?
May I ask for a roll call?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Right now, we at 2.
We go until it runs out. We go with the 3.3 is the question.
2 years or 3 years, we going with 3.2.
And we have to learn to operate more efficiently. We have to address those elementary schools whether we want to or not. Yeah, we have to address them. Everybody's just kicking their can down the road, but we have to address it. Just that simple. Nobody will just take a stand and address it. You can't have both.
What's
So,
next?
so perhaps we could move on and try and close sometime before midnight.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, no.
Mr. Chairman, from,
Madam Chair, did you get your motion?
Yes, Mr. Pennell, we did.
All right, good enough. Excuse me? What was your motion, Madam Chair?
It passed.
Okay.
All staff, starting January.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, School Board. Thank you, Board of Supervisors. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Mr. Chair, I got.
Yes, hold one.
I got one question. What is the dollar amount? Are you all gonna request the dollar amount from us? I mean,
1.6.
the 1.6 at one time, or you want to,
We request approval to use the 3.3 as we need it.
No.
do, it's gotta be done in years. I mean, it should be.
Starting January,
It'd be 800.
and then July 1, you get 1.6 more.
You just want it for 2 years.
It's fine if you want to do it in stages.
So it'll be a year and a half.
Okay. Somebody write us a letter about that, right?
yes, sir. Mr. Chairman,
Go right ahead.
I'd recommend, I guess, that the school superintendent should send a memo to us exactly what the request is for the remainder of the current fiscal year, because that's really all we're worried about right now. And that would be how much from the carryover funds you need appropriated into which categories to cover all the different categories since you're funding all employees. And then if you can get that to us, then this Board of Supervisors can, I assume you could address that at your December 6th meeting and approve that carryover request if that's what comes to you. I think that'd be a good protocol.
Mr. Brandon, you got something to say?
Yes, sir. If you would, please, I would just like to acknowledge what Mrs. Sandra Coleman, Ghana Coleman said, because it does trouble me. I think we're doing the right thing if we're going to raise salaries to look at teachers and support staff. However, we would expect you to be more efficient. And it's easy to get us into this commitment and a year and a half later say that we had trouble down the road. That'd be very unfair to our teachers and staff.
We walk by faith, not by sight.
Well, we also got to have something to walk on. So all I'm saying is we definitely need to make sure that we're doing everything possible within the operations because we can only stomach so much ourselves. We have other responsibilities other than the school, and as we forementioned today, that 50 cents in real estate taxes, you're getting all of that plus some. It really squeezes us, and we do want to support you in your efforts, but we also need very, 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 very prudent decisions within your operations. And Mrs. Coleman, you're right. You can't have everything. You can't ask us for $120 million school, all of our real estate taxes, penny sales tax, 2 more cents. You know, you get to a point where enough is enough. Again, we have other responsibilities. We do want to help. I do appreciate the meeting tonight, but we need your help. Please don't expect us to get in and commit to an expense that forces our hand. That's no way to work together.
Madam Chair, one more item. If we wait until December 6th, that means that this is not approved tonight, which means we are again pushing it out. If Dr. Lindberg can give us a number of what we need from the school, the unused funds right now, because I'm sure he can, he knows these numbers, of what we need to do for the next 6 months, I would request that you guys approve that tonight so we can get this finalized. And then the second piece was I would recommend that we start a committee for reviewing the details of this and operational efficiency. Whatever we need to do for that, we can discuss that in the next board meeting. Whatever we can do tonight to get this approved. I'm seeing shaking heads, but that means that we, once again, have agreed as a board to approve this. This is the second time that we've agreed to approve the salaries, and we're still not having a decision, a final decision.
No disrespect to the supervisor sitting on the board. However, the Board of Supervisors have already made it very clear that they would not vote until they take it back to their financial committee and look at the numbers. No disrespect to you, but they're gonna go back and take a look at some numbers, okay? Thank you.
Madam Chair, I would like to inject
Yes.
that, so that we can get a definitive number to present to the Board of Supervisors for our facility project, we need to interview our architects, our potential architects. I don't know if we need an action on that or not, but we do need to address that because, I mean, first of the year, you're gonna have to, they need to know that, don't they?
I think they postpone that to December meeting. That, like PPE, we need to do that too as well, where we may use PPE or whatever else. So those two items that I've already been talking about those. And I think we need to cover, seem like everybody's ready to go. Now I think we can come out better talking about those at December meeting.
But we were thinking we would interview them so we can make a decision by the December meeting.
Right.
Oh, okay.
All right. Mr. Potts, you want to make a motion for that so we can go ahead and take care of that and then adjourn? Do I have a second?
Oh, second.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay. All right. Meeting is adjourned.
Motion from the Board of Supervisors to adjourn.
So move.
It's been motioned and second. Is there any further discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? We adjourn.
Take care, man. Ah, my head busting open.